I kind of wanted to get something on my chest. As many of you may know, that I did a video a couple of days ago which was very controversial for a very specific reason, and it has to do with something I said, which was that I would do a fourth video in a series that I made, and I promised back in, I think, the end of May that I would do a new Necromancer video. Now I did do a PTS video, but by now it's ridiculously outdated, and a lot of people commented to me that, you know, I still hope they made a Necromancer video, and where is it? And I'm very sorry for that. I shouldn't have made that video, at least before I did my Necromancer video, and I want to apologize for that. So, talking about that old video from the Elsewhere patch, that was a video made on day one, and I don't really feel that a lot has changed since then, at least in terms of the power and balance. Now, that video was a very positive response in terms of the playstyle, but a very negative response in terms of balance, and not a lot has happened since to the class, which means that the conclusion of this video is pretty much going to be the same. But I feel that I've learned a lot about the class since. I haven't had the opportunity to play it a lot in raids, but I've paid good attention to the raiding scene, and I have had time to test it in dungeons. So I feel like it's time for an update, because the build is not the same, but the conclusion to the strength of the class is going to be the same as the old video. So with the Necromancer class being very overpowered, or at least overloaded as I called it on the PTS, why did it not grow in popularity? Why did we not see Necromancer videos or users all over the place? Why was the Necromancer not a core staple of any raid team by the start of the Elsewhere patch? And to quote DJ Khaled, our best friend, it's because it was suffering from success. Necromancer damage dealers were simply so overpowered that, because Source is trying to force diversity, you know, deep down our throats, we had to pick up the other classes on the healers or the supports, mainly healers in this case, which meant that the healers didn't get to enjoy playing, you know, the Necromancers, who were ridiculously overpowered for a very long time. It was attempted a few times in Elsewhere, but I don't think any of the top scores by the end of the patch were done with Necromancer healers. But it slowly started creeping up, and today, you know, we often see a Necromancer healer replace a Warden or a Templar, which they should, because they are just so strong. And I think with the nerf that came with this new Dragonhole patch to the Colossus, we will see a lot of Necromancer healers, even in lower end groups. I'm not calling anyone noobs or bad players, I'm just saying that throughout the bracket of group skill and competitiveness, we will see a lot of groups picking up Necromancer healers, and this is because damage dealers, especially stamina damage dealers, are tired of playing the Necromancer damage dealer. It does not feel good. It does not feel good to play a Necromancer damage dealer. So any chance they get to ditch the class, they will take. So healers, rejoice. You will get to play as much Necromancer as you possibly can. They will let you. There's the cap in a group is about 5, so there will be a few damage dealers probably enforced against their will. I don't know, maybe voluntary, having to play the Necromancer still, but all the healers that want to play the class, you'll get to. So why do a healer want to play Necromancer? And I think it definitely has a lot to do with it being basically the most fun healer class to play. I think we should go a bit into how I set mine up. So what you will see immediately here is that I use Master Architect. This is because I really enjoy using Master Architect in dungeons. Now I don't raid anymore, which means I don't need specific raid setups. But if you were to take Necromancer into a raid, you'd probably want to pick up something like Sense or Martial Knowledge. Now, if you want to know more about how these two sets work, I suggest you check out some of the more actively raiding healers like Tabatta or Style, because I simply haven't used the sets. I don't even own them. But I really enjoy Master Architect, especially combined with the Colossus. It's so much fun. It's such a huge spike of damage. Otherwise, Symphony is still a very strong set, and of course you want Honor Remake. Let's take a look at the front bar. So here you will see 3 abilities. Now the first one is again the burst heal. This one works a lot like Breath of Life. Now instead of having just the secondary heal always being there, it's tied to the corpse mechanic, which is unique to the Necromancer. And it's still very strong. Now on the Necromancer this is more of a flex, but you could slot something else here, but for 90% of the time you'll be having this burst heal. Now the second is the pet, and the pet is basically very strong, but unlike my old video, I prefer to use the long duration morph now. I feel like the short duration morph is just too short, and the Goliath is only here for the death cleaning passive, which I'm showing here. Ideally, if you want to min-max, you want to use the Goliath on trash packs, and then you want to swap in barrier for boss fights, but I basically leave in the Goliath all the time, or I would be. I've been using something else because I've been poking a lot, so I've been using the renewing animation, which is the res ultimate. I feel like in dungeons this is like a lifesaver, and I value it over actually having the extra sustain. Now, this is only in dungeons. In trials and score runs you will always be using this on trash and then swapping in barrier. You would never use the revive ultimate in a score run, but if you're progressing trials or just casually running trials, this res ultimate is very strong and definitely a good front bar slot. Just know that if you use an ultimate on front bar like this, you'll be losing out on the Colossus and a lot of damage. So the back bar, this is where the true strength of the Necromancer lies. There is a lot of Necromancer skills here, and I'm going to talk about all of them. Now the Necromancer, something also mentioned in the old video, is the only class in the game to have 2 unique skills with synergies that aren't tied to ultimates. No other class in the game has 2 unique synergies that aren't tied to an ultimate. There are classes with 2 synergies, but one of them is always an ultimate. So this is very unique, and this makes the Necromancer a very potent support class. But there's something extra to them. These aren't just synergies that you throw and they pick them up, and the effect isn't that strong and you don't really do it for the effect. These 2 synergies both have very strong utility tied to them. Now the first one here you see is Major Breach and Fracture as on the AoE that you throw the Boneyard. Now the second one gives minor vulnerability, and it also gives minor protection. So this means that on an AoE trash pool, the entire group that is within the zone of the totem is gonna be taking less damage and doing 8% more damage. Now you can get minor vulnerability from other sources, such as lightning heavy attacks or maybe the set from Asylum that the tank uses, but this alone makes the Agony Totem very potent. And this was the main concern on the PTS, having 2 synergies with utility tied to them is way overloaded. Like, 1 synergy with a strong utility tied to it alone is very potent, but 2 is just out there, and that's why I also believe the Necromancer to be right now by far the strongest healer in the game, or healer class in the game. So this is basically the very peak of the strength of the Necromancer, but there's more to it. You have access to basically the most ultimate region in the game. Well, this becomes very important when you then combine it with the fact that you also have the strongest ultimate in the game. So, like, how you have access to the most ultimate region in the game is by the necrotic potency skill, which basically takes corpses around you and grants you ultimate, combined with the corpse consumption passive, which gives you ultimate for consuming corpses. So imagine both of these combined is an enormous amount of ultimate at once, and these 2 tied together makes for the most ultimate region in the game. Now, talking about the Colossus, there are two morphs, and I have a bit of an unusual morph on this. This is because the other one does frost damage, but stuns by then. Now, this is very much a choice of what you want, because this one will do less damage on your healer, but the other one stuns, which is not very nice for the tanks. A lot of tanks don't like things getting stuns. Now in trials, especially something like Sunspire and Maul, the ads are immune to the stun, which means that it doesn't matter if you use that morph or this morph, and in that case you want more damage, so you choose the frost damage morph. But I'm just gonna put it out there, if you use the frost damage morph and use it on trash, be aware that you might actually stun someone in the trash and make your tanks very annoyed. Just be aware of that. So in the old video from the first week of the PTS, I talked about the sustain of the Necromancer, which was something I mentioned something like 20 times. And this was the only thing that was ever really addressed which I mentioned. Now, I'm not saying I'm the reason it was changed, I'm just saying that was the only thing I addressed. And basically, except for in trash fights, where you have the death cleaning passive, which I mentioned earlier, you don't actually have the best sustain out there. They did nerf some of the very strong passives, such as reusable parts, that was halved, and the undead confederate passive, which was also nerfed by about 1/3. It used to be 300. So this is why I choose to use the clockwork citrus fillet as food, because the Necromancer does not have as much sustain as the other classes. Now this food also makes a lot of sense because of the last gas passive, which was also nerfed, something I was really surprised by, that it used to be 2000 on the first week and they almost halved it, and that's some of the overload of the Necromancer gone with that. So with the Skill Breaker or Game Breaker DLC, whatever you want to call it, there are a lot of changes to healers, mainly, orbs and illustrious healing and so on, which meant that no longer was Atronach really the go-to Mundus choice. Now, you could still go with the Atronach Mundus and then go with Bystat food, which is still a strong choice, but it makes more sense to go for some of the more aggressive or healing increasing Mundus stones. So what do we want to go for now? Even with major and minor faults not working on healing, crit is going to be the most powerful Mundus choice. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to pull out a spreadsheet and go through exactly why that is the case. I'm just going to mention that crit pretty much always wins in this game, and it's the same for healers. So in terms of raw healing, the ritual is still the strongest. So if you want to just pump out as much healing as possible in a trial, whatever you're doing, go with the ritual Mundus. And I wouldn't recommend anything else in these three. So Atronach with Bystat, Thief for the damage, and Ritual for the healing, basically. Now crit healing, the Thief of course also adds healing, but the Ritual beats it out there specifically. A few other things I want to mention before I wrap this video up is that Expunge is still a strong skill, but I wouldn't put it on my boss at all times, because we simply don't have the boss space for it. There's simply too many good skills, but it's a very powerful skill. And another thing is that the Necromancer does have the Rapid Rot passive, which makes the damage over time effects quite significantly stronger. Now this means that the Necromancer healer, if you want to mid-max for damage between the healers and really go into that kind of stuff, is a really strong choice for Sands, where you want to stack dots. So that's just something to pay attention to. As for race, it's still gonna be Breton. You still want the Medicinal Use passive, you still want everything in terms of these things stay the same as before, nothing has changed here. And to conclude the video, the house I'm in is made by Lara Northwind, so if you want to check out her YouTube, you can do so. I just chose to go here because I think it matched the theme. And the Necromancer is still super strong. I'm afraid that outside of very, 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 very specific magic-oriented groups, you will not see the Sorcerer Healer return to ESO endgame, and I'm actually a bit sad about that, because the Sorcerer Healer is also very interesting. The Necromancer simply does what the Sorcerer Healer does best, but just better, a lot better, like twice as good. Because we have two synergies, that's why it's twice as good.